Mr. Hilts, you're on to 927.
I think with the Army Corps of Engineers, we have the worst of two things. We have bureaucrats who are also in charge of tanks. That's not actually true, but it's frustrating, no doubt about it. We are going to talk about something that is actually the opposite of frustrating. It's actually really inspirational. And in the front material here that's on screen, you've got the rationale and some of the reasons why we believe it's going to be the right thing for our district to walk forward pursuing a ballot measure to fund teacher compensation for the next 7 years. I'm actually going to jump in and create a tab a little bit later on. But as the board knows and the community is learning tonight, we contracted with Magellan Strategies, which is Colorado's premier school finance polling company, and we asked them to help us understand whether or not a ballot measure would be viable in our community. So we're looking to ask our own voters, our own constituents, whether or not this is an idea that they would support. You've already had this for about 3 weeks, and so I'm not going to walk through this entire presentation, but I do want to show you some specific pages. One of them is this page right here. Do you approve or disapprove of the job District 49 is doing? And you can see that we have almost double strongly approve versus strongly disapprove. We get support from our community. It's critical because if we have strong opposition, it's much less likely that it would be worth our time to walk forward. If you look here, I'll start on this one and then we'll skip to the next one. Just generally, do you have an unfavorable or favorable opinion about District 49? You can see here that you have a 3 to 1 ratio on the total favorable versus total unfavorable. But look at that very favorable at 21, 3 times the number of very unfavorable. And interestingly, when we dug a little further into the data, you can see there that Director District 1, which happens to be 3 of you, Ms. DeVol, Ms. Liu, and Mr. Van Weeren, we had the strongest positive response there in Director District 1. So that shows us that we are earning the respect of our community. That respect is amplified when you go and look at the rating for teachers specifically. Look at this. We have 10 times as many people that have a very favorable opinion of our teachers as have a very unfavorable opinion of our teachers. So this is a very powerful indicator of community sentiment about our teaching corps and the job that they're doing. So when community members or board members say the district is failing or we're not living up to the expectations of our community, we have hard data that suggests the opposite, and it's from the very constituents that would be impacted by this measure. I'm going to jump us up to page...
Mr. Hilts, if I may.
Sir?
Are these director districts in this the old ones or the new ones?
They're actually the new ones because they had to look at what was in place at the time that they did the polling. So this was post the board's decision to adopt the new director districts.
Thank you.
So I'm going to jump all the way down here to the informed ballot measure, which is 18. So before people knew what the ballot measure was about and that it included a sunset and how long it was for, there was 49% support, there was 42% opposition. And again, it's always interesting to look at the strongly, or in this case, the definitely. We were kind of tied on the definitely yes and the definitely no, but we had more people that were probably yes than probably no. This is the starting point, so this is sort of the baseline. And then the pollsters go through and they share information about the ballot. Again, you've seen this. I'm not trying to gloss over it, but I want to get to this chart that shows you that after information was provided, we moved significant numbers of people out of the no vote and significant numbers of people into the yes vote. We actually increased the number of undecided, but we increased them by bringing them out of the no category into the undecided category. And those moves were shown here. What happened on the right was the baseline pre-information, and what happened on the left is information. And this is only one instance of information on a phone call. So this isn't a campaign, this isn't visuals, this isn't conversation. We have reason to believe, and our consultants would confirm this, that if we do a good job of informing our constituents, they come to the conclusion that it is worth supporting this MLO. So I'm gonna share with you, you've already got this is in the packet, members of the community can look at this, but I'm gonna share with you the presentation that we are recommending the board move forward for action at the meeting at the end of this month on August 23rd. We are proposing that this board ought to conceptualize this as we love D49 teachers. Now, these are public assets. There are reasons that we won't be able to promote this. We want to follow Fair Campaign Finance Act, but we believe the concept that we love D49 teachers is the core concept that will drive us to a victory if we place this measure on the ballot. We have fewer local revenues compared to our competitor districts, and I'm going to show you something right now. This link here is a live link. Watch what happens at the top on the tab. I'm now on the CDE Financial Transparency website. You can see that in the URL, and I have the ability now to compare districts by adding districts. So this is actually this is our data here. We're District 1110. Our neighbor to the west is Academy District 20. Their number is 1040. So D49 and then District 20, and then I'm going to go ahead and add District 11, which is 1010. So now you're seeing us next to the other large districts in El Paso County who are our primary competitors. We compete against them for staffing, we compete against them for grants, we compete against them for students, and we compete against them for reputation. If you look at this overall chart, and I'm just purely scrolling down, the key measure I want you to see here is how we're funded. We're on the left. We are more dependent on state funding, and by a lot, than our competitors. And we have less local funding coming into District 49's budget than our competitors. This is a dramatic and impactful difference, and it has been for 2 decades. Our community loves our teachers, they support our school district, but there are realities of the funding model both in our state and the funding provision in our community that mean we are more dependent today on the state by a factor of 2 to 1 to District 11. When you look at those middle lines, 74% of our funding comes from the state versus 48% in D20 and only 40% in D11. That is incredibly important because it means that we are more at the whim of the state funding process and future state budget adjustments. And despite the fact that we do a really good job, this is data from the same page, despite the fact that we do a really good job of competing for and earning grants, as Ms. Tiernan mentioned earlier tonight, our DODEA grant success has been spectacular. Our success at getting local accountability and curriculum and instruction grants has been fantastic. We're still outmatched. We can do a lot of things on the supplemental funding side, but those grants are one time or they're for a specific project or purpose. They don't give us the flexibility we need to adjust to market conditions. And this is again from the same website at CDE. You can go check my numbers or check my screenshot. You can see that we do a better job of getting gifts, grants, and donations, but we're still badly overmatched in local funding, 3 to 1 and 4 to 1 in Districts 20 and District 11. Both of our neighbors have a lot more property value, $3.5 billion in D11, $2.2 billion in D20, to $1.3 billion in D49. This comes from data from the Colorado School Finance Project. You can look it up yourself. This is the most current data that they have. And not only do they have greater property values, but they also have more local funding from those properties. And this is based on their rate of taxation. Although our rate is slightly higher than District 11, their corpus, their body of assessed value is so much higher that they can generate more revenue at a lower tax rate. So both 11 and 20 generate far more local revenue than we do, and it's not because our community is not committed, it's because of the way Colorado taxes property, business property relative to residential property. And so we're overmatched. We are outspent, and this is absolutely a bidding war. We're bidding for talent. We're bidding for the kinds of futures we want our students to have. We have great teachers, but they're earlier in their career. I would rather have a great teacher in year 5 than in year 2. And every teacher will say so about themselves. They'll say, you know what, I got better, and then I got better again, and then I got to a point where I could not just be better, I could be great. And so we're building, and this shows you here what we've done over the last 10 years. When I joined the district in school year 13, we were behind both of our competitor districts, and we've been around $3,000 behind District 20 for the whole time that I've been here. But we have fought, especially over the last 5 years, to get closer to close that gap. We're not 3,000, we're not 2,000 behind. This year we're $1,000 behind, and you can see, look what we did last year. We caught up to D11. The problem is when you have 4 times as much local funding, you can react, and you bet they reacted. They didn't like having to compete with us for teachers, because when our compensation is equal, we have a superior culture and a superior calendar. So if the dollars are equal, we win that bidding war for great teachers. And D11 saw that, and they reacted, and they jumped their base up to $50,000. We're catching D20, but they're not dumb in D20. They're going to react too. And so we're going to see that although we've clawed our way to parity, they're going to extend. They're going to kick, and they're going to try and get out in front. That's why we need to pay attention to this data. This is our voice of the workforce. This is our very own workforce telling us they love each other, they love their managers, they feel connected to our mission, they appreciate manager communication, but the lowest rated item year after year after year is competitive salary. And even there, we're above the K-12 average. We're just not good enough to attract as many and hold as many, retain as many teachers as we need. So the context, and a couple of you have talked with me about this, is that compensation does lift teacher quality does lift school performance, and school performance does lift perceptions of community and especially home values. So we believe that it is in the interest of every resident, every homeowner, every person in our community, whether they have children in the school or not. This has a direct long-term impact on the value of probably their most highly valued asset, their home. And so there's a reason why informing our community about this relationship here will help us go win this. So this is our recommendation. We are asking for, and you'll see ballot language in just a moment, we're asking to provide a consistent 7% annual raise for all teachers. Every single individual who is paid on the teacher salary schedule would be able to count on and project out 7% a year for 7 years. This tax and this commitment would sunset after 7 years unless we improve our performance by 40% on the Colorado Department of Education District Performance Framework. But to accomplish this, we have to ask our community to commit to a 7 mil, to make a 7 mil commitment on this measure. And the ballot language then looks like this. I know it's small. The next 3 slides, it's not so small, but you need to know that it will show up. It has to be in all caps. It has to have certain phrases in it. And so I broke it into thirds. The first part is here. I'm just going to pause. I'm not going to read this to you. But this is language that has been vetted by our bond consultant, our bond counsel, our own general counsel, Mr. Miller, our CFO, Dr. David Trottenberg, reviewed this from London. All of the smart people were in the room, and I got to hang out as well. This is the language that they approved. So let me start here, and then I'll go through the next 2 slides quickly and see what questions you might have. Kind of give me some eye contact when you're ready to move.
Oh, I'm ready to move. So one of the questions that comes up is, but heck, the county assessor just raised our property values so much that we're going to be paying so much more in taxes. Tabor would limit that because we can only collect a certain amount. But we as a district are detabored, which means we don't follow that as far as our taxes go for the school district. So we're going to collect more money from local resources because of that, but what does the state then do?
So it doesn't change the size of that ring up there, it changes the proportion. When we generate additional local revenue, then the state gives us less revenue, but it doesn't, those assessed valuation increases that we're all seeing on our home tax bills, those don't generate more revenue for us out of the state funding formula. It changes that ratio, and it doesn't change it a whole lot because we're so dependent on the state. But as we discussed in the lead up, thank you for those good questions, that doesn't help us on the state funding formula side. It does help us on a prior mill levy override, but it helps us very, very marginally, and certainly not enough to fund this kind of a commitment to our teachers.
In other words, the state's going to not give us more money. The state's going to take away money from what they normally give us because they're going to say we already have money.
Mr. Graham, it's very analogous to the welfare system, where sometimes individuals who are receiving state assistance or government assistance, there's a disincentive to getting a job because not only will they lose that amount of social benefit, but they'll also now be taxed. And so they actually have an incentive not to go to work. This is actually similar to the way that the state funds schools. It is almost like a state welfare system for the district. And as we generate those assessed valuations that you just described, the state will reduce their funding amount.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, I'm going to start with Jamie Lynn.
Yes, it said that it'll increase 7% a year for 7 years. Does that mean that the homeowners would be increasing how much they pay every year?
It does not. It means that the increase, and I'll skip to this right here. So it means that the district is making a binding commitment, because we can't bait and switch. It would be dishonorable, it would violate trust and responsibility, and it would make it hard to sustain enduring trust. So if we put this measure on the ballot and it passes, we are on the hook for 7 years of 7% raises for anybody on the teacher schedule. But if I go back to the first page, and this is just the same text but in a larger font size, the amount of the tax will not exceed 7 mills. So the tax is not exponentially growing. The compensation to teachers is exponentially growing. These 7 mills will not fully fund all of the increases that we're committing to teachers. But we have to raise teacher salary to compete anyway. What this fund will do is give us an opportunity to raise further faster so that we can compete with folks that have an advantage over us.
Another question. As the property values increase, the amount that the homeowner is paying will also increase.
That is correct, because we have asked for a mill rate measure, not a fixed dollar rate measure.
Does the state still take money away if we get this?
So because this is a mill levy override, this takes us outside of the state funding system. It's local dollars that stay local, and the state doesn't have a way, like the state can't come in and collect these dollars. They're exclusively, and in fact it says it in one of these slides, it says it here in the middle of the slide, to be deposited in the district's general fund. So this doesn't take a lap through the state and let them skim off the top. This goes directly into our
So this
fund.
stays local to our
Local dollars staying local.
teachers that are
paying
local, and they use that money in local businesses usually and stuff like that. So it stays local in our community. Okay.
Correct. Mr. Graham, may I just mention, all of us are under incredible stress, not just for housing costs and costs of goods and services. And I have heard from many people, why would we want to raise taxes at a time when we're feeling pressure on our, I absolutely agree with that. But I'd ask you to put yourself in the position of a teacher for whom paying taxes on a home they own is a dream, and it's a dream that is distant. Right now, and I have a daughter who teaches in this district, in order to be able to afford on a teacher salary to live in this larger community, she'd have to drive about 40 minutes to get to a place where her teacher salary could fund her housing. And that's true for a lot of our younger teachers, which is a lot of our teacher corps. So this helps us literally bring them closer to the district where they want to serve.
Director Van Weeren?
So, going back to the slide about that shows the millage rate between the three districts. So if we're successful on this actually just brings us to still just a smidge below where D20 is even.
Correct.
And my understanding is D20 is planning on also doing a mill levy override this year.
I've heard that as well. As I said on this slide, D20 is not stupid. They see us coming. There's smart folks over there, so they're going to do what they can to maintain their competitive advantage.
Director Thompson?
I know that they have not finished the appeals, and with the assessed valuation increases, do you have a general idea of what the average cost would be to a homeowner?
In the Magellan survey, it actually specifies what this would be. If somebody else finds it before me, tell me what page I want to be on. In the center of the right-hand side, a 7 mil property would cost a homeowner about $48 per $100,000. Mr. Van Weeren, what's the average home in D49 right now? Let's say that it's $500,000. That's actually high. Okay. And in District 49,
472 was the whole city.
in the whole city, in District 49 is a little lower than that. So
We're close to that though for last month probably.
let's use $450,000. So that would be in the neighborhood of $225 a year for an average home buyer. We're asking our community to put love into action. We know our community loves our teachers. We're asking them to put that into action and make that commitment so that we can have the teachers our students deserve and our community needs.
Director Liu?
I have several questions. What is the cost of putting this on a ballot?
So because we already have a school board election, I do not believe there is any incremental cost. So in a sense, we get a free ballot measure. With 3 board members, get 1 free ballot measure. My wife says I have no sense of humor, but I'm going to tell her people laughed at that.
So what is the proportion of
Some
loss?
people.
Some people laughed.
What is the proportion of loss of income from the state? That sounds almost punitive. So when we gain our local taxes, the state takes away. What is that proportion?
Is that the negative factor?
I think are you asking me about the negative factor?
Well, yeah, whatever you want to call it. Basically, they're rewarding us working harder to get local money. They're punishing us, actually. So if we get more local money from the homeowners, they'll take away money. What is that ratio? What?
It's 1 to 1. If we raise $100, they will reduce state funding by $100 on the state formula. On the state formula. That's why growth and assessed valuation doesn't really help the district. It helps the state.
Okay, I'm not done yet.
It helps the state because they have to send less money to D49.
So I saw that 1,500 people or so were surveyed. I'm a homeowner. I didn't get one. I know a whole bunch of people that didn't get a survey. How were people surveyed? Who were the people that filled out these things?
So they had such a good response. First of all, Magellan Strategies is the best polling firm on school finance issues in the state of Colorado. They're one of the best in the nation. David Flaherty, named here at the end of this presentation, routinely presents at CASE conferences, CASB conferences. Many of you have met him and have been in his conferences. This section at the end tells you who responded to the poll. And so this tells you the proportion of people that responded from the different director districts. This here tells you a little bit about their demographics. Party affiliation here, as you can see, it was weighted appropriately to match what we have in District 49. And so this is a scientifically valid sample of our district.
I guess all I hear about, and I may be, obviously my world could be limited, is how the recent increases in taxes alone is weighing on people. It's stressing their finances.
And yet
I-
65% of the parents would support this measure.
Right. How accurate is that?
Highly,
all I
highly
hear
accurate.
about is people hurting for money, including teachers, of course. I don't know. I'm just bringing that up, that at least the people that are in my circle, my whatever, this is nothing they would vote for. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. I hope I'm wrong, actually.
I appreciate that, but I'll just be very blunt, Director Liu. Your anecdotal conversations are not as valid as this. This is the survey data here on the bottom of each slide. The N, which is the survey sample, is 1,416 people. And because of the way it's scientifically weighted and representative, the margin of error, that's the MOE initialism, the margin of error is plus or minus about 2.5 points. So that means that when you ask about the parents, those who have a child in District 49, in the worst case scenario, you've still got 62% support from our parents. Our parents want us to do this. And I have heard over and over from this dais that we should pay attention to our parents. This is an opportunity to pay attention to our parents. If it's plus or minus 2.58 on the good side, then that means that almost 70% of our parents, so somewhere between 62% and 68% of our parents want us to move forward, knowing that this will cost them. They still want us to move forward because we love D49 teachers, and they want us to put love into action. That's what we're asking the board to move forward. I'm persuading. I'm being as persuasive as I know how to be, because I think this is a defining moment for the future of D49. I actually think both of our big, hairy, audacious goals depend on this measure.
I hope I'm very wrong from what I'm hearing. I do.
Ms. Liu, you're not wrong at all. You are hearing from people who agree with the perspective that you shared over and over from this board, that the district is failing, that
I don't have that much influence, Mr. Hilts. I don't.
Well, we did see in District 1, we got more support than in the other districts, but it's natural that people who have been more skeptical about the district's performance are going to hear from other people that are more skeptical, and it's natural that people that are more sunny and optimistic are going to hear from sunny and optimistic people.
So I am part of the demographic, if you will, that is normally against this kind of thing. I don't have kids in school in the district at this point. I am at an age where I would be in, what's the word you use? Curmudgeon?
I didn't use the word curmudgeon.
Outdated,
you might be the
obsolete.
third from last column.
Yeah, but here's the other thing that I see. So property taxes are going to be affected by these new valuations, and we don't know how it all ends up yet, because Proposition HH is still a wild card in this whole thing. We don't know kind of what we don't know. Here's what we do know, though. We know that teachers that were paying $2 a gallon 4 years ago to get to work are paying $4 a gallon today. We know that teachers that were paying $6 for a sandwich at Jimmy John's are paying $9 today, or more. And so we are in an environment that we feel the inflation effect, but our teachers are creamed by it, because when you're the starting teacher at 40, we're at 47?
Correct.
Okay, 47, that's a very, a lot more of your income is going to the things that have been going up the most. And for us to make their battle to survive and to have a roof over their head and food on the table and gas in the tank and clothes on their back, and especially if neighboring districts are actually going to try to widen that gap again, I don't see how we achieve accreditation with distinction if we sabotage our own efforts to get good teachers that will make this district succeed. And so I mean, I look at all this and I say, I don't want higher taxes. I don't want to pay them. I don't want my neighbor to have to pay them. But what I really don't want is for somebody who's got their kids in one of our schools saying, I've got a long-term sub for my kid because your district can't hire teachers because the neighboring districts are paying them more and they went for the extra money. I don't want that either. And so I think it's a rock and a hard place, but I think that if you let voters decide this stuff, then they can actually decide. And we don't get to decide this. That's a very clear thing about how this whole system works. We don't get to decide whether or not this 7 mills happens. The voters do if we put it on the ballot. And I'd argue that the best time to put it on the ballot is when it's free and when the data seems to show that most of our parents and most of our teachers would actually be very positively affected by it.
Director DeVolo?
I have a question. I know that Ridgeway had been working on equalization. How does that come into play?
So the State Equalization Fund is a different, it's sort of a one-off fund within the state education system. It is helping us this year. It's generating about 1/10 of what this proposal would generate to the district. So not nearly enough to support the kinds of raises that we would like to see. And I want to tell you that if you look at 12 districts, Mr. Anderson did some great research for me in preparation for this. If you look at 12 local districts and you compare how much we've raised our teachers over the last 12 years, 10 years, and 5 years, we are incredibly committed, and we are the #2 district in the entire region in terms of the amount of raise we've been able to generate for our teachers. We are doing a better job than every other district at putting more and more dollars out of our total budget for our teachers. The only district that has outpaced us is a district that has been selling property, selling businesses, and closing schools like crazy because they're declining enrollment, and that's District 11. They have been able to generate new money by selling properties and consolidating. We can't do that because we're growing. They can do that because they're shrinking. And so the state equalization money is a help. The grant money is a help. But this number, it's too big a number. As I said, even generating $9.9 million a year does not fully fund 7% a year for 7 years. We're going to have to continue to be creative and find places to cut and attract new dollars. But it gives us a jump start so that maybe we can get our nose in front and then fight to hold on to that lead and attract great teachers and retain great teachers.
Further questions? Director Thompson?
I know that this has already been said, but the bottom line is I can tell you from professionally that perceptions do make a difference, and they mentioned home values. If you took a home in School District 49 and a comparable home in School District 20, I can tell you which one's going to sell for substantially more. I know currently, I think the rate of inflation is closer to 8%. So the 7% for the teachers, you know, it'll help. But the thing is, and I think the most important thing is that when I originally ran for the board, it was on parental choice. So this is just a discussion whether or not to put it on the ballot, and then it's up to the community to decide. So I think that it's very important to let the community decide whether or not they want to have the additional 7 mills on their tax bill. And if they decide yes, they decide yes. And if they decide no, they decide no. But I'm in favor of letting them have a say in their schools.
Thank you. I've been against every big tax increase coming out of Denver. The $1 billion for education a couple years in a row and stuff like that. And the reason for that is because they take that money and most of it stays in Denver. And it goes to Boulder along the I-70 corridor. More money was coming out of D49, was being collected at D49 and going out of our district and staying in our district. I'm against the way the state spends, and federal government too. I mean, $30 trillion debt, unfunded liabilities. It is insane. And we borrow from an enemy that seeks our destruction. But I am in favor of letting communities decide. And personally, I'm in favor of local control, choice, and local taxes that stay in our community than I am letting Denver politicians and federal politicians pay off their donors. So for me, I am for moving this forward, because I do think if the community wants a quality education for their kids, then they gotta pay for it. Right now, you're getting what you pay for, and I've said that 4 years ago, and 6 years ago, and 2 years ago. So the people that complain that we're not educating kids, we're blowing it this way or we're blowing it that way, the only way to educate kids is this. You have to have academically rigorous standards, which Colorado doesn't have. Their standards are based on Common Core, and they just released crappy social studies standards. You have to have highly effective teachers, retain and hire, and you have to teach them how to do highly effective instruction. You've heard that from Director DeVola plenty of times. And the only way to retain highly effective teachers and to hire them is to pay them what they're worth, close to what they're worth, because someone else is going to take them to get them. And, you know, we have competitors that will do that. So it's up to the community to decide what kind of education that they want to have. You can't keep complaining about the education in District 49 if you don't volunteer to help out and you don't help pay what teachers are worth, in my opinion. And I understand it's very, very hard right now. I know someone who's probably viewing this online, lives on my block, and she's screaming at me right now. Okay? But I do believe in allowing the community to decide. And I do know that the attacks are going to come, and the lies are being created right now. And they're going to say that I'm always for tax increases, and I'm always for this, and I'm always for that. We see it happen all the time on social media. Republican meetup, this site, that site. And the bottom line is people will lie to try and get power over you.
Call the question.
Oh. So my point is that I think that we as a community need to decide what kind of education and whether we want that money staying here and not being tied to Denver and not being tied to the federal government, which you guys say about the requirements anyway. So at this point, I think everyone's had to say, what does the student think? You just got to turn your microphone on. Speak right into it. Get real close like this.
Sorry, I'm mostly in the middle. I see both sides. I'm trying to evaluate which one is, in my opinion, better at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I really have to say about it.
Okay, thanks.
Chris.
It's a hard question, and I think it absolutely requires some critical thinking. It also requires some emotional thinking, because this is a both-and issue. But I want to point something out, and then I'll say no more unless you have other questions. But this is the most string-free money that District 49 will ever see. Because this ballot language, the lawyers did not like this, by the way. You can ask Brad Miller, because he was on the call. They didn't like the word guaranteed. But I'm not willing to advocate for something that isn't a guarantee. I don't want to leave us any wiggle room. The lawyers wanted wiggle room. I don't want wiggle room. The lawyers didn't like that it says a binding commitment for multiple fiscal years. They wanted to be able to say, well, we have a fiscal emergency, and so therefore we're not gonna keep our word. I wanted to make sure the ballot language forced us to keep our word. The lawyers would have preferred that we expand it beyond teachers. And the reason this language says teachers is because there's no wiggle room. We can't evade it. We were intentionally trying to create absolute clarity, undeniable, no strings clarity. The dollars raised go to one place. Guess what? When we improve our performance 40% and we get rid of the sunset, our community is going to cheer because we're committed to continue to use these dollars for teacher salaries forever. All of those intentional commitments, binding commitments, guaranteed commitments, those are in there over lawyers' objections, because as your superintendent, I listen to our community, I listen to our teachers, and especially I listen to our parents, and they want to make sure that we do exactly what we say with these dollars.
It does concern me with people on fixed incomes. Are we ready to move this forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Hilts. We're over our time.
Thank you, Board. I
And-
appreciate the indulgence of extra time. Thank you.